So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we get to welcome Tarek, who's come to share on the topic of the sacredness of the trials and low spots for up to around 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. So with that, Tarek, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous. My name's Tarek. It's good to see everybody. It's good to be back to this group. See a lot of familiar faces on here, and that always makes for a pleasant experience. It's amazing how the far reaches of our fellowship and the blessing of one of the blessings of the pandemic, believe it or not, that we're able to have these meetings on this stage and to share the deep connection that can take place over this bandwidth, so to speak. It's amazed me. And many of us thought the pandemic was a trial and low spot. And look how it's turned out to benefit so many of us in so many different ways. A power greater than myself separated me from crack cocaine and alcohol and a host of other substances on the morning of November 5th in 2007 because of a merciful and a loving God. The program of Cocaine Anonymous, program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and both of those fellowships, and the desire to surround myself with a group of men and women that are excited about life, and they're also willing to tell me the truth, even if my feelings might be hurt in the process. So as a result of all those things I just listed, I have found it unnecessary to use alcohol or any mind-altering substance to treat any degree of psychological pain that I'm experiencing. And for that gift, freely received, spontaneously received. Now, I've had to do some work to prepare myself to receive other gifts, but that first gift of separation that I experienced, that first miracle, it has to happen spontaneously and very quickly. Otherwise, there's no speaker here. And I've got a debt to repay, and I'm the only one that can pay that debt. And I truly do believe that. My sponsor is big on, I get the opportunity to do this a lot, and sometimes I forget, I start talking about a subject, a topic, and if I don't share a little bit about where I came from, you don't get to appreciate the transformation as much. I wasn't always a guy that liked to talk about spiritual concepts or ideas or share experience. I was a guy who liked to smoke crack. That was my, I was a smoker. That's what I did. That was my great pastime. And along with a lot of other drugs and a lot of alcohol. If I look at trials and low spots, let's first the topic, which is the sacredness of the trials and low spot. And the word sacred, that has several meanings, but the ones that jump out to me are this idea of something that deserves respect, something that is highly valued and important. That makes it sacred. And a lot of times I look back over my life before the transformation took place, and I received that merciful and graceful, grace-filled gift of surrender and willingness. The trials and the low spots before that were the reasons I became a drug addict and alcoholic. I was sexually abused from the age, I know it's hard for me to pinpoint, but I'm going to say from like the age 5 to 7, I was sexually abused. I grew up in a very violent alcoholic home. Father and mother did the best they could. But nonetheless, my father was verbally, physically, emotionally abusive as a result of his alcoholism. And so I had reasons, at first it was a reason to not be that way. I'm not going to end up like my father. And as life progressed, it turned out that I became my father. which was very interesting when it came to the inventory process and it came time to make amends. I was abandoned at a young age, left overnight to stare out a window waiting for my mom to come home because my mom didn't know how to deal with a violent alcoholic husband. She would scream, pull her hair, pack her bags, yell, tell the boys she was leaving. She couldn't take it anymore. And then me and my younger brother would drag these chairs into the dining room. We'd hop up on the chairs. We were apartment kids, and our apartment was the first one as you entered into the complex. And so we would drag the chairs and stare out these windows all night long, watching every set of headlights pass us by, waiting for our mom to return. And sometimes it was a few hours, sometimes it was a couple of days, but the emotional wounding, psychological wounding that was inflicted upon those kids at no fault of her own. She did the best that she could, but it created a deep psychological wounding inside of these two little boys. So I had all these trials and low spots to use as a reason for my alcoholism and my drug addiction. And eventually, God would send some angels to save me. These angels were 5 Duval County police officers that showed up in my life on the evening of November 4th in 2007. And they separated me from cocaine. And I was incarcerated, and I began to have a transformational experience through the surrender, through being entirely alone. For the first time, there was no one left to manipulate, no one left to use. Nobody was interested in how I was going to manipulate them. I had run out of road. I was approaching the last house on the block. Hey, Young, quick question. What time do you want me to stop?
Timer in the 33 minutes left.
Oh. You still there? I lost my AirPods, but go ahead. What time do you want me to stop?
You got 33 minutes left. There's a timer in the top right-hand corner.
Awesome. Let me see if this works. You guys hear me okay? All right. I apologize for the technical difficulty. No, and I'm approaching the last house on the block, and I'm blaming all the trials and low spots that I've had in my life up to this point. And it's interesting, we're asked to share our experience, our strengths, and our hope. And I've been thinking about that a lot over the past few months. Do we really share our strength? Or are we truly sharing our brokenness, our weaknesses with one another? We bond in this setting when I sit with a newcomer, when I sit with someone that I'm working with. Typically, the bonding that takes place happens with us discussing trials and low spots, right? It's not our strength. It's God's strength. It's not our willingness. It's God's willingness through us. Is the St. Francis prayer something truly that we can live? For years, I looked at the St. Francis prayer, and God, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hate, let me bring love. I thought I was going to do some work, to be the channel, and God was going to send the understanding to me, the comfort to me, the love to me, the forgiveness to me, and then I was going to send it out into the world. What I've grown to understand from experience is that I already have all these things. God created me with love and a capacity for understanding and a capacity for comforting and a capacity for forgiveness, and I have forgotten. So this journey that we're on is a journey returning home to all these things that we've always had. And it has a lot to do with these trials and low spots. So I'm here today not to share my experience and my strength and my hope with you. I'm here to share my experience with my weaknesses, with my limitations as a human being, with my powerlessness. With an acceptance of this is the way God created me. This is God's handiwork up to this point. And there's a couple of things I want to read, and we're going to see where this talk goes. The first thing I want to read is out of the 12 and 12. It says in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's on page 104 in the 12 and 12. It says in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have found that the actual good results of prayer are beyond question. They are matters of knowledge and experience. All those who have persisted, if we persist, that seems to be a word that's been talked about a lot in our sponsorship family here recently. If we persist, we will have found the strength, not ordinarily our own strength, through trials and low spots. We have found wisdom beyond our usual capability. And these individuals have increasingly found a peace of mind which can stand firm in the face of difficult circumstances, trials, and low spots. We discover that we do not receive guidance for our lives to just about we discover that we do receive guidance for our lives to just about the extent that we stop making demands upon God to give it to us on order and on our terms. Almost any experienced AA will tell how his affairs have taken remarkable and unexpected turns for the better as he tried to improve his conscious contact with God. He will also report that out of every season of grief or suffering, when the hand of God seems heavy or unjust, new lessons for living are learned, new resources of courage are uncovered, and that finally, inescapably, the conviction came that God does move in a mysterious way, his wonders to perform. The idea that the trials and low spots is my proving ground. It's my providence. Calamity is my providence. I really find out where I am on the God idea as trials and low spots are experienced. I want to read another excerpt from the Big Book, page 100, a paragraph we're all familiar with. Both me and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If we persist, remarkable things will follow. When I look back, I realize that the things which came to me when I put myself in God's hands were incredibly better than anything I could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and I will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what my present trials and low spots are. You know, there is a spiritual concept or metaphor known as the dark night of the soul. And I believe that this dark night has something to do with trials and low spots sometimes, not all the time. And so I'd like to read something that I was introduced to, and then that's all the reading you'll get out of me. So we'll still have almost 30 minutes of no more reading. But the dark night descends on a soul only when all other things have failed. When you are no longer the best meditator in the class because your meditation produces absolutely nothing. When prayer evaporates off of your tongue and you have nothing left to say to God. When you are not even tempted to return to a life of worldly pleasure because the world has proven empty. And yet taking another step through the void of the spiritual life feels futile because you are no good at it. And it seems as if God has given up on me. I can scarcely conjure up my old passion for God. It's become clear that I am unable to do anything to solve or remedy my spiritual brokenness. Let's clear away some misconceptions about the dark night of the soul. The first is that authentic spiritual growth requires monumental struggle and tragedy. For some people, not everyone. Suffering is not something designed to test the spiritually elite. It simply arises from the circumstances of life. Nor does the dark night of the soul only occur once in a lifetime. Perhaps it doesn't only happen to holy people. It can happen to lay people. And we must get rid of the idea that it is a bad thing, that I'm doing something wrong. The dark night is a profoundly good thing. It is an ongoing spiritual process in which we are liberated from attachments and compulsions and empowered to live more freely. Sometimes this letting go of old ways is painful, occasionally even devastating. But this is not why the dark night is called the dark night. The darkness of the night implies nothing sinister, only that the liberation takes place in hidden ways. Beneath our knowledge and understanding, it happens mysteriously, in secret, and beyond our conscious control. For that reason, it can be disturbing or even scary, but in the end, it always works to our benefit. So, I share this with you because I think about it. I read that, and we can be in a room that's completely dark. Our eyes just have adjusted to the darkness. And then when someone opens the door and the bright light comes in, we still remain blind. And so most of us were unwilling to go through that period of time that causes us to adjust our eyesight when the light comes in. So we run back into the darkness, unwilling to weather the storm. And so a lot of these trials and low spots that I've been through over my 18 years, sometimes I don't want to go through the transition period or the adjustment period where my eyesight is adjusting when the light comes in, but the light seems to be dark. I mean, think about it. What's one of the darkest periods of our lives? Our struggle with drugs and alcohol. So when God came into my life on the evening of November 4th and he dressed up as those angels, those police officers, in my conscious mind at the time, I thought I was going from the light into the dark. I'd entered the dark ages of my life. I had 2 Schedule 1 felonies, 2 drug trafficking charges. I'm going to prison for a long time. But I was running actually from the darkness into the light, and I didn't even know it. I was stripped. I had filed bankruptcy. I had lost my home. I was living in hotels. I had torched every relationship that meant anything to me. I had the list of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralizations, right? All that list of things I wouldn't do as it relates to drugs and alcohol. And over the years, I just kept crossing every single thing off the list until I had done everything I swore I would never do to smoke crack cocaine. And here I am at the turning point, crushed by the self-imposed crisis I couldn't get away from. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't evade it. I had to walk in and look at this period with the light shining in. What am I going to do? I didn't know anything about the God idea. I didn't know anything about a second step proposition. I didn't know anything about making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care and direction of this power that I don't understand. What was different between November 5th and November 4th? What happened on November 5th when the angels appeared in my life? Massive trial and low spot. And the grace of God entered. The mercy of God entered. That unmerited, undeserving, divine intervention that is the catalyst for my transformation and my regeneration, that grace. But then you have this thing, mercy. I didn't deserve what I received. Didn't deserve it. I was given compassionate treatment. I was a human being in distress. And I was given compassionate treatment by this power that I don't even have a relationship with at the time. Never tried to lay aside prejudice and ask myself what spiritual terms mean to me. Never taken the time to even consider what it would be like to live a life where God exists on a regular basis. But yet this distressed human being was given the gift and received the grace for free and spontaneously. When preparation or initiative meets opportunity, there's a wise man used to say, God makes that introduction possible. He introduces the two. I had willingness, and God created the window of opportunity that window of grace. And he wrapped me around with mercy, clothed me in it, and I walked through. So there we have this trial and low spot called my addiction to crack cocaine. And it has delivered me to the best life I've ever known. You know, I mean, who's taken more people to God than the devil? Look at the great trick that the God played on the devil. Right? If you subscribe to that sort of thinking. So I sit here before you making a statement that I believe with every cell in my body that one of the greatest things that God ever did for me was make me a drug addict. He created me as a crack fiend. And it was the catalyst that transformed my entire life. One of the major trials and low spots doesn't seem like a trial and low spot. One of my major weaknesses does not mean it's my major weakness. It's a source of strength. It was a great liability. Now it's my greatest asset. And so I walked into the spiritual life. I began to walk the spiritual steps that we call the 12 steps. I have had great influences. I've had the great giants. I stand on the shoulder of giants. I had a man that worked with me for 2 years. I had a man that worked with me for 8 years. I've had this other gentle giant that has worked with me for the last almost 9 years. And he's walked with me. He's been my companion, but he's also further down the path than I am. He's closer to the river, and he brings me back these handfuls of water. And he's constantly telling me, Tarek, go to the river, asking me on a regular basis, where do you stand on the God idea? If people are watching your actions, do you act like you're a man that really believes in God? What happens to Tarek when he's in these trials and low spots? Because that is the proving ground. I love joy. I love being happy. I love the great gifts that we receive in this way of life. But me personally, just in my own experience, doesn't have to be your experience, those do not deepen my faith and my reliance on God. They don't always take me away from self-sufficiency. Anything that moves me further away from self-sufficiency is humility. It is humility. As I move closer to God's sufficiency, I am moving away from self-sufficiency. You know, we have that old saying that God won't do for us what we can do for ourselves. But what if God wants us to do everything with him? Why are there things that have to be left that I have to do on my own? Why not extend an invitation? Now, God's always present, but extend an invitation to everything I do. God, will you come with me? God, walk with me. Take my hand. Take the master's hand. Walk up this mountain. So I walk out into these spiritual steps, and this man that's been working with me over the last 9 years, he's helped me understand the idea of softening, the idea of losing the rigidity, that the form and the structure and the rules we have to follow in the very beginning are extremely important, but they eventually fall away. Everything becomes integrated into who we are and the way we live. It's the same as saying the numbers in front of each step eventually fall off the steps, and everything is interwoven. The fabric of our existence is shot through this way of life. It just bleeds into what we're doing here. And I think that is cultivated through our trials and low spots. So happiness, joy, great. Sacred struggle has done so much for my dependence upon this power. I drift back and forth like we all do on this call. You know, so in other language, that means I turn it over and I take it back. I don't really spend a lot of time discussing it in that way. but I do like discussing self-sufficiency versus God's sufficiency. And my sponsor loves to point out the ways in which I play God today, and they're very subtle. The ego is very crafty. I'll give you an example of a blind spot. My sponsor and I love to talk about blind spots. One of the blind spots I have, check this out. So I have two stepsons. Both of them have drug addicts for fathers. One of them lost his father to a drug overdose. The other one's father has burned his life to the ground. He just got arrested again a few weeks ago. And about 3 months ago, I'd say 2 months ago, I come home and there's this thing on the kitchen counter, breakfast with dad on Tuesday at school. And I want my stepson, my 10-year-old, who I adore. I don't have my own children, but I can't imagine loving another human being as much as I love this little boy. And I want him to pick me, right? I want him to pick me. And I'm talking to my partner about it, and the dad's not showing up. He's just not. He hasn't been in his son's life consistently in 4 years, 5 years. And I want him to see that I'm the superhero dad, right? I am here to save the day. This is good motive. This is good intention. This is what the master would want to have happen. But this is how subtle and crafty my ego is. My sponsor asked me, well, Tarek, what happens if you win? If you get to show up for your stepson, good thing, right? What was lost on me because of my blind spot is that if I win, my little boy loses, because my little boy wants his dad there on Tuesday morning, not me. That's how my selfishness and my self-centeredness shows up today. And believe it or not, that was a trial and low spot, because it was hard for me to hear my sponsor tell me that. And he was right. 100% right. This is the way I operate today. But I was so quickly able to get on the beam, so quickly able to see it through a spiritual set of eyes, because of this way of life given to me by Alcoholics Anonymous, given to me by the grace and mercy of God. I've got about 13 minutes, so I want to talk about a few things and see if I can squeeze these into 13 minutes. I was prepared. I was thinking, like, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. And at the beginning of season 4, after the Red Wedding, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're not, I'm sorry, you'll just have to bear with me. But after the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, at the beginning of the 4th season, there's a character named Tywin Lannister who's taken this massive sword, and they've melted it down, and now they're going to make 2 swords out of it. And you got the smith is at the forge, and he's melted it, he's shaped it, and he's putting it in the fire, and he's hitting it, putting it in the water back on the iron, and he's hitting it, and he's melding it. It's being tempered. It's being prepared. This is what trials and low spots do for us. And of course, I can't go much further without saying what Bill says to us in his story, that if an alcoholic and a drug addict fails to attempt to perfect, and I'm using perfect and enlarge his spiritual experience, he's not going to survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. So, in 2014, I was going through the steps by a man. His name was Bob O. out of Denver, Colorado. He passed away last year. He was a great influence in my life. He was taking me through the steps, and he asked me what I thought about when I thought of God's will. And I gave him a very beautiful and rosy picture of what God's will is. And then he asked me a series of questions around, I was married at the time to my ex-wife, and he asked if, what happens if you get in a car wreck tomorrow and you can't work? Could that be God's will? What if your stepdaughter gets cancer and she has to start chemotherapy? Could that be God's will? What if you lose your home? Could that be God's will? Etc. He said, for the next week, I want you to do this exercise. I want you to place everything on the altar. What are you willing to give to God? What are you willing to sacrifice? God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you will. That means that God can do whatever he wants with me. What am I willing to sacrifice? And so I sat in that consideration for a week, and then I took the third step. And then this was January of 2014. And I began to experience a series of events, and I wandered into the dark night, and I wandered into the desert that I read about, where prayer didn't produce anything and just evaporated off my tongue. Meditation didn't produce anything. The material realm, purchasing things all the time, eating food, pornography, sex, whatever, none of it did anything. None of it. And this is the events that took place that took me to that place I just described. I had a kidney stone for the first time. After being clean and sober for almost 7 years, I had morphine shot through my body again because of this kidney stone. I slipped on the ice shortly after that, and they tried to put me on more pain medications, but by the grace and mercy of God, I didn't go that route, but I had a pinched nerve in my back. I had 4 ER visits that year. Our home was broken in. It was burglarized. Me and my stepdaughter came home as the burglar was leaving the house. As a result of that, my ex-wife and my stepdaughter couldn't live in the house. They were scared. So we had was that 6.5 years sober, I'm moving back into my parents' basement. I spent the first year mostly around the treatment center, but then I spent 2.5 years in my parents' basement because I had so much money to pay back as part of my financial amends. And when I left the basement, I said, I'm not darkening this basement again. And here I am again, living in this basement. My ex-wife goes out of town on a girls' trip, and I have to put the dog down while she's out of town. Not a pleasant experience when you're putting the family dog down. I had 5 surgeries. I used to tell everybody it was a lower back surgery, but it was actually a rectal surgery. I just was so embarrassed to say rectal surgery. But yeah, I had 2 types of surgeries in that part of my body that were excruciating. I had a knee surgery and I had a sinus surgery. And then when they were examining my sinuses, they accidentally found a tumor on my vocal cord. So now I've had to get a mass removed from my vocal cord, and they need to test it for a biopsy. Every single time I'm put on pain medications. Every single time. My stepdaughter starts having seizures, and we discover she has epilepsy. She breaks her elbow. And then all of these events that I just described to you happen in the span of 9 months. So one day I'm getting ready in my bathroom. I'm in the mirror and I'm trying to put on one of my favorite shirts. And I've gained a lot of weight at this time. And this shirt that I love doesn't fit. And I'm in the middle of these experiences I'm having. It seems like I'm in a boxing match with Mike Tyson, and he just will not let up. This is what life has become. And at this time, I'm untethered to God. I'm so consumed in self-pity. I am so indignant. Like, God, why are you doing this to me? Why have you forsaken me? After all the work I've done for you, this is what you do to me? Very adversarial, very confrontational. I'm not tethered to God, so life, I'm an open wound, and life is salt at this point. And I screamed and I ripped the shirt off my body like the Incredible Hulk. And I just screamed profanities at God. And I remember walking out of the bathroom, falling to my knees on the ground and just begging God. It was all I knew. It was the only place I could go. Only refuge and sanctuary I had at the moment was to ask God to keep me safe and protected. The very thing that had brought all these events to me, all these trials and low spots, was the very thing I was asking for help. So I am convinced, and I've heard many, many great influences of mine say this, that prayer does not change the circumstances, but it changes me for the circumstances. They're experienced a little bit differently. Trials and low spots. This was the prep work too, guys. You would think that series of events, at least I do, was the pinnacle. All right, this is the biggest mountain I'm going to have to climb. Well, that was 2014. So then in 2017, that violent, abusive father that was, I spoke briefly about earlier, I made amends to him after being estranged from him from the age of 17, 18 until 31 when I get sober. And I asked him what I could do to make things right because I hadn't been a very good son. I beat my dad up. I spit in his face. I said things to him that no son should ever say to a father. And I built a life with him. I began to date my father. I fell in love with my father. When I showed up to make my amends, he had drank everyone away. He was drinking himself to death in a one-bedroom condo. The only human interactions he had at that point were his cousins, 2 cousins. I fell in love with him. He began to come around my family. My mom started to invite him to a few events here and there. The next thing you know, he's having Thanksgiving with us. The next thing you know, he has re-entered the family because of Alcoholics Anonymous, because of Reunited Homes, because what of all of you showed me was possible through living this program. So in 2017, this man gets diagnosed with cancer, and I start taking him to chemotherapy. And those were very difficult Friday afternoons. I'd have to sit with him for 3 hours at chemo. Nobody else in the family, it was my responsibility, was going to lift a hand to help me with that. During that same period of time, my marriage falls apart. And then around the time I met my current sponsor, this was around February, March, April 2017, my ex-wife says she doesn't want to be married to me anymore. She asks for, we get divorced. And my dad goes into hospice. And I'm having to take care of my dad. I remember crushing the pills, putting them in the syringe, Oxycontin, Dilaudid, morphine. I remember the nurse looking at me doing it. And she's like, damn, you do that better than most of the nurses I know. Yeah, I said, I know, I've had a lot of practice. And I took care of my father, and then this is the trial in those spots, right? I remember I had no place to live because I was living out of a bag at my friend's house. I had nowhere to call home. My mom allowed me to bring my father into this room right here where I am today so I could take care of him while he passed. So I could play music and chant and meditate and use my prayer beads as I witnessed his transition. And I had to change my father's diaper. And I remember looking up and my stepdad's there to help me change my father's diaper. In what world is that possible? In the land of Alcoholics Anonymous. In the land of Alcoholics Anonymous, that is possible. And I remember during that period of time going to my friend Lindsay's where I was staying, and I would curl up in the fetal position. And I'd say, God, I don't know how much more of this I can take. Please, please help me. Because I was the one watching my father die. I would be 24 hours on, and then I would leave, and then my mom would help me or my stepdad would help me. My brother never did. It was such an mentally exhausting, spiritually beautiful experience. Trial and low spot. Trial and low spot. I had done a lot of spiritual work up to this point. I created a lot of space to store emotional pain. I was able to take the master's hand and walk up the mountain. It is these experiences that made me fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous even more, because during all of these experiences, you were there. You were there to hold my other hand as we walked up the mountain. And Young, I'm going to take a couple more minutes. I got to tell this one story that's a recent story. The man that was my second sponsor was diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of 2020. And he lost his battle to cancer on October 6th of this year. Prior to October 6th, on September 19th, I was able to do a video call with this man. This man carried the message to me in many different ways. We had a literal love and hate relationship. But he was my guy for almost 8 years, 8.5 years, my guy. What you have today on this talk, part of his DNA is over this. Just like my current sponsor's DNA is here, I've got another man's DNA on me as well. And I watched this man who was facing death with oxygen. He was skin and bones. He showed me what was possible when we face death. We can face death grounded with some grace if our life is clean, if we have cleaned up the wreckage of our past. And so on October 13th, I was told by a doctor that I have a lot of white lesions on my brain. They did a bunch of neurological exams for me for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, multiple sclerosis, and all the tests, thank God, came back negative. But I have way too many white lesions on my brain for a 49-year-old. So I'm high risk for a stroke or aneurysm. And I know I've got to quit vaping. I know I've got to change my diet. And so I begin this process of I'm going to stop vaping. And so I had a sponsee who had done it using a book and prayer. And we talked about it. And he's actually on this call today. And so I called him. I said, hey, Kieran, are you still not vaping or smoking? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. Because I came out of meditation asking for guidance and direction, and that book came to me. So I started reading this book, and in this book, it has clear-cut directions. It says, don't stop vaping while you're reading this book. And the doctors have emphatically said you need to stop because of the way the nicotine and the vapor acts on your brain. It's not safe. And so October 16th, I'm driving home from being out of town for work, and I'm still vaping at this point. And my left arm goes numb. My left arm goes numb is a sign of a stroke. And so I call my partner. I'm telling her what's happened. I'm constantly rubbing my arm. And as I'm doing this, I'm praying, and I've been using this book, and I've been using it in my 11-step practice, and I'm asking God to guide me and direct me. And I hear this voice, stop vaping. I haven't vaped since. The weekend leading to that doctor's appointment on Monday, I knew the doctor's appointment was coming because that's when they called me on Friday to tell me my brain showed white lesions. If I had not had that experience with my old sponsor on the phone, I would not have seen what it's possible to confront this death that we all have coming. Death is coming for every single one of us. My experience from Friday to Monday morning, when I did all their neurological tests, would have been different. Trial and low spot with my former sponsor, trial and low spot with receiving some health news you don't want to hear. Being able to face it with grace and dignity and not get on Google and find out what does white lesions on your brain mean. Not once did I do that during that weekend. Trials and low spots are gifts. They are gifts. And the greatest gift God has given me is my recovery. And what I do with my recovery is my gift back to God. And I hope God is pleased with my gift to him as I am with his gift to me. I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous. My name's Tarek.
I'm going to start with Young. Would you like to come in?
Oh, thanks, Isaac. Hi, everyone. My name's Young, recovered alcoholic addict. Hey, Tarek. So good to hear you. It's often when I listen to you, just so much comes up for me, reminders of experiences that I've not yet explained or I've forgotten about. But my question, I've got two really quick ones. The first one, I shared a few times, remember I deal with agnosticism, cunning, baffling, powerful. And then as you were speaking, I was thinking, maybe that's the point of agnosticism, to send me into those trials and low spots. So that's my first question, if you've got any thoughts around that. My second question is, when you spoke for us last time, and I think I phoned you after to ask you about it, but I just wanted to put it out there again. You said, and you kind of touched on it at the end, you said maybe the whole point of this thing is to get us so we have a clean death. So I just wanted to ask you those things. Thank you so much, Tarek, brother. Thank you.
Oh man, good questions. Those questions could be another talk. There's great questions. The first one is agnosticism and the role it plays with sending me into those experiences that make me realize where I stand on the God idea. And so is that the right way to look at that question, Young? Is the quote unquote current agnosticism a good thing? Is that one way? Do you want me to look at it? Can you give me, I got the second question. Give me that first question again, real quick, summarize it.
The first question, the agnosticism that perhaps will always be there as part of my humanness, is its purpose. Does it have a purpose rather than something I'm fighting against? God, remove this. Does it have a purpose?
Yes, 100. Okay. So many people on this call, I'm going to make an assumption, have grown up with the idea that page 52 in the bedevilments is what happens to us when we are agnostic, right? They called them the agnostic. When I was first taken through the book, we called the bedevilments the agnostic promises. And they're manifestations of the spiritual malady. What is the spiritual malady? When I am consumed with self, separated from God, I have problems in personal relationships. I'm full of fear. I can't control my emotional natures. I'm hunted by misery and depression. I can't be of real help to other people. The list goes on and on. And so this idea that the agnosticism plays a role, I think it has to be considered. Let's look at the word agnostic. It means without knowledge, whereas a Gnostic is a person who has knowledge. I've really struggled in the last several years in understanding, like, is there such a thing as current agnosticism? It's impossible for me to always trust God, right? If this thing was about trusting God, the big book would be one page long. It would be like, God gets you sober, keeps you sober, have a nice day, we're all going to fly away. But that's not the way this works. But this current agnosticism, just like defects of character, just like current unmanageability, if we're practicing a 10th step and I become aware that, oh, I'm about to embellish this story so I look a little bit better, right? I always remember I improve the truth. It's lying, but we call it improving the truth. It just looks better, right? Puts me in a better light. And so therefore I see that with my active 10th step and I pause, right? So the defect is still there. I'm still got that thing in me that thinks the dishonesty is better than telling the truth. But what has happened as a result of practicing a 10th step, the very thing which could be an example of current agnosticism, I don't trust God in the moment to tell the truth, so I'm taking it back and I want to tell my version of it, has triggered my remembrance of God. So why can't it be that all of this current agnosticism can be a catalyst for remembering God? You know, I like to talk about from the fear page. I think it's like page 67 in our book. It talks about calamity, or we can approach calamity with some serenity, but I think calamity is our providence. That's where we find out what our relationship with God is all about. And I think current agnosticism is part of that. I have to experience my limitations. You know, one of my favorite definitions of humility is this. I was just reading it earlier, and I think this has to do with confronting my agnosticism, living my powerlessness with the knowledge of my character defects and limitation and acceptance of what is unfolding in the present moment. Humility. I'm subservient to all those things. But without this knowledge, you would see it as I'm agnostic. I've taken my will pack. I'm being driven, right? Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. I would see the agnosticism as a really bad thing. You know, it's like people that say faith and courage can't exist at the same time. They have to. They have to. I have no idea if that answered your question, Young. I hope. Yeah. Give me the second question real quick. I
Second
remember.
question. Yeah.
I remember. Don Pritz, who was my grand sponsor or great grand sponsor, for a period of time, used to talk about the dash on our tombstone, right? October 12th, 1976, dash November 5th, 2007. I'm in my second dash right now. You know, what if our lives, our dashes are about preparation for the moment? Because the one that's coming for every single person sitting on this call is death. Death is going to find everyone. So what if my life is preparation for that moment? God willing, by God's grace and mercy, I will see it coming. When I watched my father die, I've watched what regret and living an unclean life does. He and I were clean. Every single other person that came to say goodbye, he had a few cousins, his sisters who he hadn't talked to in decades. He had some nieces and nephews that were there that he hadn't seen in a lot of years. He had my mom, unfinished business in every direction, unfinished amends. He never had the consciousness that there were amends to make. So what if our lives are preparing us for the moment? Would we venture to clean up the wreckage of our lives? Would we venture to be as much of a servant as possible in our lives to really understand that this way of life is about the refinement of our character over time? These are the most important things in our lives. How many people can we help? Can we live a life of purpose? Love thy neighbor is not just the person next to me that lives next door. It's a different kind of love thy neighbor. Because another thing is like what I wrote it. If I have not acquired the ability to see God in all things, I cannot see God in myself. So, yeah, Young, I do believe this part of our journey is really about preparing for the transition to the next journey. I know we're in Alcoholics Anonymous and we're in Cocaine Anonymous, and some of us are trying to stay away from the first one, right? I get it. And it's difficult sometimes to answer these types of questions because we got some new people on this call, I know. But this is an important part of what we do here, of what is available to us. Okay, that's it. I don't want to I took up too much time with that one. But did that answer that one?
Thank you, Tarek, for the different answers there. I'm just going to drop down question time to 1 minute so we can fit everybody in. If you guys could come in quickly if your questions, would be much appreciated. Danny, we got you up next.
Thanks, Isaac. Hi, guys. I'm Danny. I'm an addict. And Tarek, thank you so much. Absolutely incredible. My question, you spoke about persistence in the program. And, you know, how often do we see people go through the steps, they have an experience, but the persistency isn't there. You know, in my experience, in their moments, the trials and low spots, like we live life forwards and understand it backwards. And in their moments, I often can't see the benefits of what I'm doing. So my question is, have you got any advice for people who struggle with the persistence and these daily practices that in the moment, sometimes you can't see the benefit, but looking back, you definitely can? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard it. My grand sponsor talks about it a lot. Life is understood in the rear view and lived going forward. And sometimes I can't see it when I'm in it. I can't see it when I'm in the mix, right? As my sponsor says, I have to step outside of it. But persisting, this is why the early days are so important. You know, we train our feet. My feet have been trained a long time ago. And it's also having the right people around you. So we can't, you know, we hear this thing about we can't catch the steps in osmosis, right? You have to take the actions, but there is something that's contagious here. Passion, curiosity, you know, excitement. If you surround yourself with people that are excited about the spiritual realm, excited about being a servant, how can I work with others? How can I get better at it? If I surround myself with people that are curious about the spiritual practices and they are excited, like this is a source of excitement in their lives, I think that has a contagion effect. And so when I'm in it, I call it when your head is in the tiger's mouth and the tiger is doing whatever it wants to do, and it's going to let go of you when it lets go of you. It's a lot of it has to do with where we land. This is where the fellowship comes in and so important, but also training our feet. You know, I've been in the spiritual gym for a lot of years. And so when I start to go through one of these trials and low spots and I wander out into the desert, you know, my muscle memory kicks in, as my sponsor says. It just kicks in on its own because I've been doing it for so long. This was never a Monday through Friday, take Saturday and Sunday off for me. It never has been. Smoking crack was not a Monday through Friday, take Saturday and Sunday off. It never was. So why would I come in here into this life-saving, life-transforming way of life and decide I'm going to do it 4 days a week and do what I want the other 3 days? It's never worked like that for me. And because of that gift and that blessing in the early days, I'm very well trained, and that is available to everybody on this call. Everybody on this call. But, you know, get with some people that are excited about this stuff. You have them available. I've been coming around you guys now since the beginning of the pandemic. I know there are pockets of enthusiasm. I know there are people on fire for Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. Am I willing to make the effort to get in the middle of the herd? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Danny, for your question. Dwayne, would you like to come in?
Yeah. Hi, Tarek. Thanks for the share. Thanks everybody for making it a meeting. I felt like I had to come in today, guys. Yeah, I've been going through a bit of a low spot myself just lately. You know, I was doing well in the program. I went into a rehab center. You know, I came home. And I hit a low spot. I ended up relapsing after my longest period of sobriety. Felt powerlessness again after all that I learned. And I really did try to get it this time. I tried to understand everything that was going on. And since I've been home and I did realize I was blocked off from the power, I've not stopped trying to get back ever since. And when I say I've really been trying, I mean I've really been seeking that power. Only yesterday I was onto my sponsor, you know, saying, you know, I need this, I need that, you know, still self-seeking, didn't understand anything. And it's like today, I just woke up and everything just seems to have clicked for me. I feel like, you know, shouting about what's happened to me today, and but the beauty in this is, you know, it's showing to me, and yeah, I've just gone blank at the moment. But yeah, I really do see everything that, you know, it's all thanks to God that He's given me this strength back. What do you think, you know, the difference was from yesterday to today? Do you think that's something like me seeking, or is that something that I've learned, or something that's clicked to me, or is God seen what I'm trying to do and, you know, rewarded me for that? Or is it, you know, I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Dwayne, for that heartfelt share. You know, my bit of advice is to come all the way in and sit all the way down. You gotta have the corral. We gotta circle the wagons, you know, that's his question about, you know, what was different from the last day versus the surrender day, and is it some kind of reward for something, or is it some type of punishment for something that I'm not getting the willingness and I don't have the surrender? It's a very difficult question to even begin to try to answer. I have ideas about it because look, I was like you for 3 years. I'm not a one-chick wonder, guys. I started going to meetings in September of 2004. My sobriety date's November 5th, 2007. What happened in those 3 years? A lot of in and out, a lot of desire chips, a lot of experiences like yours, Dwayne, where I try it one more time and I fail one more time, but I got to a point. I'm going to tell you a big difference where I knew something was different. I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but every time I tried to get sober, I hung out. I spent a lot of time with people that were trying to get sober. I'd meet with my sponsor if I had a sponsor, and then I'd go back and hang out with the people that were trying to get sober. The last time I didn't hang out with people trying to get sober. I hung out with people that were already sober, that were already active members of Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. I did not spend time with the people I was in treatment with or the therapy groups. Didn't want to. That was a huge difference for me. So what I'm trying to do right now is ground this into simple actions that you can take after today. I don't know where you're spending the majority of your time. This is an important part of our fellowship. And I just hope you get plugged in and get around some people that understand what we're doing here and corralling and taking care and putting your hand in this person's hand and doing what we do. I hope that answers your question, Dwayne. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about punishment, reward. Why did I not get it on this day? It's available. Opportunity meets initiative. God makes the introduction, but the actions that each individual has to take and the amount of willingness that is required for whatever reason, I can't tell you why, it's different, right? When I got sober, I watched people that just went to meetings and didn't work steps and they stayed sober. Then I watched people who worked the steps, and when they got the sponsorship, they did it when it was convenient, and they didn't go after it. I've watched people practice programs of rigorous dishonesty, and they stayed sober. I can't tell you. There's no way to come up with a concrete answer to your question. But what I can tell you is to take those actions that I described at the beginning of my share to answer your question, and you will have a very, very strong possibility of immersing yourself in this program and discovering a wonderful, wonderful way to live.
Thank you, Tarek, and thank you, Dwayne. It's really good to have you here and good to see you. Frank, would you like to quickly come in and take us out with the last question of the day? Okay, I think Frank put his hand down. I'm going to stop the recording.